Good morning, everybody. We are so glad that you've joined us today for our monthly LT Senior Services webinar. And today I would like to introduce Karen Ballinger. She is going to help me, Natalie Harris, even though it says Cindy Cummings. I'm stepping in for Cindy and Karen is also going to be helping out today. So thank you, Karen, for joining us. If this is your first time joining us, we are LT Senior Services, and it's a group of local businesses and nonprofits in the Lake Travis area. And we like to help and service seniors in the area. So if there's anything that you need or that we can do for you, please let us know. I'm going to put the website and my email address in the chat. So if there's any way I can help you, please do reach out. And then today, our topic is very important. It's one that I think all of us definitely need to learn about, and it's called Having It Your Way, even when you can't speak for yourself. And I'm going to mention we have Q&A and chat. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, throughout their presentations, please feel free to put your questions in either the chat or the Q&A, and we're going to save those for the end, but Karen, Nancy and Ginny will both be available at the end after their presentations to answer your questions. So whenever they come up, please feel free to pop those into the chat or the Q&A. And I'm going to have Karen introduce herself. She's going to introduce the library and just tell you a little bit about herself. And if there are any other Lake Travis Senior Services members who would like to introduce themselves, I'm going to take a look, but also feel free to raise your hand. So I'm going to give it over to Karen here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Natalie, for having me. I saw in the chat, I think Cindy just had a conflict, but I think she's okay. Is that right, Natalie?
Yes, she just had a conflict, yeah.
So, and I always ask, like Travis Senior Services is great, and they let the members give a little bit of spiel about what they're doing. So since I was going to be on to plug the library, as I'm sure you've all seen before, I was just going to join for the rest of the presentation. But yeah, I work at the Lake Travis Community Library, the one in Lakeway by the pond, not the one at the mall, at the Galleria, which we love very much, but we're not the same library. I'm usually on the bookmobile, but the library is doing curbside service right now, so you can request items and then pick them up outside the library. We're also doing a lot of Zoom presentations. So this Wednesday, actually, we're doing our Lake Travis Reads event. So I don't know if you remember last year, right before everything closed for COVID, we had a big presentation at the Bee Cave Public Library at the Galleria. This year it's going to be online. We're going to have Lisa Wingate, who wrote a series of books, Before You Were Yours. They're very popular, Before We Were Yours. So she's going to be talking this Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Zoom. If you're comfortable with Zoom in this format, you can also join us for that online, and you can register at the library website, and I'll put that in the chat. So if you have any questions, I'll put my information there. But we really appreciate Natalie and Cindy and everyone at Lake Travis Senior Services giving us all this great information. Are there any other members, Natalie?
I don't see any. So I guess we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for having me. I am very honored to be able to introduce our two speakers today who are talking about, as Natalie said, a very important topic. Our first speaker will be Ginny Erboe from Hospice Austin. She has been a registered nurse for 25 years. She has her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Texas Women's University and a Master's in Nursing Administration at the University of Texas. She's been working in hospice for 19 years with 17 years at Hospice Austin as an admissions registered nurse. And prior to that, she was at Seton Medical Center on the cardiac floor and in the electrophysiology lab. So her passion is to serve and help others. Thank you, Ginny, for being here. And then after Ginny, we'll have Nancy Walker. She's with the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Central Texas. She's been a full-time volunteer with them since 2010. So in addition to providing presentations throughout the Austin community, Nancy teaches an end-of-life options class twice a year through the Lifetime Learning Institute. She also produces the nonprofit organization's newsletter and serves as the executive director. better. So thank you so much both for being here, for talking about this really important topic. I think Ginny's going to get started.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. And thank you so much, Natalie and Karen, for having Nancy and I. And so we're super excited to talk about definitely a passion that I know Nancy and I have. And let me share my screen. I will mention that before we get started, so all of the materials that you need, Natalie is going to email out or have available on the website or in a Google Drive document. We are super glad to either mail out or bring by copies, printed copies for you guys. If that's just easier, sometimes that's easier than printing them out. So it'll have a couple booklets, it'll have all the documents. And then also depending on, we may kind of do a little raffle, and we have some books that we may be able to throw in there. And one of them that I know right now is called The Conversation by Dr. Volandes. And so that's a really great book to read. So let me share my screen. Let's see. And let's see. There we go. Okay. And so St. David's Foundation gave us a grant to go into the community to provide this information about advanced care planning. So Shirley Price is the director of advanced care planning, the GIFT project, which stands for Giving Instructions for Tomorrow. And it's just education about advanced care planning, starting the conversation, and how to complete your documents. So at the end of this session, if you find that, you have more questions, Nancy and I will be here afterwards for a little while. We're glad to stay a little bit past time, which I think is at noon. Or you can email me or call me. I'm glad to set up a little private session. So whatever you guys need, we're definitely here to serve. So let's just take a moment and ground ourselves. So kind of sit upright, place your feet on the floor if you can reach it. I'm so short, I can't quite reach the floor, but let's just close our eyes a minute and just take a moment and just really thank yourself for being here for this next hour and a half, for really gaining some tools to help during this unpredictable time in the world. And let's, kind of roll your head if you need to, and relax your shoulders. And let's just take a deep breath in together and blow it out. Let's open our eyes. And I like to start off with a funny, and there's two fish in a fish tank talking, and one fish says to the other, "I've already made arrangements to be flushed down the toilet." So I think if the fish can do it, I definitely think we can do it too. So there are no conflicts of interest. And at the end, when Natalie emails out to everybody, there will be a link for a survey. And it's real short. It just provides information to St. David's Foundation that we're doing the good work that we say we're doing for this grant. So if you could please take just a few minutes to fill that out, that would be extremely helpful. So my portion for the learning outcomes and objectives is how to initiate and facilitate having an advanced care planning conversation with your loved ones and patients if you happen to be in the healthcare world. Discuss common barriers for having these conversations for healthcare providers and individuals and their families, and then identify and discuss the Texas Advanced Directives. So to get started, let's watch this little video with Diane Sawyers talking about the conversation.
And finally tonight, ABC News wants to join you in something right at the heart of the American family. How we can all help the people who care about us make decisions near the end of our lives. And 9 out of 10 of you have told us that we should all be talking about it at all ages, what we want. And yet only a fraction of us have done it. And we know it makes a huge difference in the health of the caregiver as well as those cared for. So ABC News has taken cameras inside a vital, loving family, part of a new community, deciding to have the conversation. This is 85-year-old Norb and his daughter Maureen.
My dad is 85 today. He's still very, very active. He's a wonderful friend.
Throughout life, daughter and father have always talked about everything, except one thing: how to control the end of your life in the same way you control the prime of your life. So dad and daughter gather the family together, 3 generations, for an act of love.
And so now we're just asking that you share some of your thoughts about what you would like at the end of your life, so that we can honor your wishes.
They are part of something new underway for families in America that says having the conversation is a gift parents and children give each other. And there's proof of the difference it makes. Studies show depression rates plummet after a loss if the families have had the conversation. Renowned physician Dr. Atul Gawande says doctors and nurses see it firsthand.
When you're there in that moment and you're talking to the family and you're saying, how much will it bother your father if he ends up this way? And they say, more often than not, I don't know. We never talked about it. That it is incredibly traumatic for the family, for the doctors involved. There's often conflict. It can tear families apart.
So Dr. Gawande has become part of a team led by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman. It is called the Conversation Project. It is a kind of guide for families looking for a way to begin.
If we give them a way to talk about it and give people something to hang on to when they're afraid to start this conversation, they can do it and pass it on.
Families like the Jennings. They looked over the conversation guide before they sat down together. First, there's laughter.
Oh, my golf swing's still good.
And then Dad directly eases his daughter's guilt and worry about having put their mother in hospice.
I felt like that meant we were giving up on Mom.
She was in a lot of pain, and I think it was handled real well.
And next, Maureen asks her dad for clarity on what he considers a good end to a great life.
So if you were in a condition where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, how extreme would you want us to take measures to save your life versus letting you go?
Well, I think I'm ready to go anytime. You know, I wouldn't prolong anything. I mean, I've lived a great life. Pretty lucky. And because of you guys, you know. And
unexpectedly, a grandson is inspired to speak up about his own wishes for his own life.
That if there was no meaningful communication, that I would want you to stop trying to intervene.
we aren't ready for you to go that soon.
Well, we're not ready for you to go that soon either, so.
And one by one, the others weigh in, all ages.
Don't do that.
Happy birthday, dear Grandma.
And with that, another family has joined a kind of estate planning for the heart.
Go.
A conversation beginning in America.
Well, so that brings up a good question. I don't know if you guys have thought about it, but who will be making those decisions at the end of your life? Will it be you and your loved ones? Will it be an EMS provider that came when you dialed 911? Or maybe a hospital physician that you haven't even met yet? So hopefully it'll be you and your family making these decisions. So what exactly is advanced care planning? It's just basically the communication between ourselves and our loved ones with our healthcare providers, talking about what's important to us. What are our values and preferences? And that information will help to shape future medical care. It's not about making immediate decisions, and it's not just a one-time conversation. Just because you have it now doesn't mean that you're going to want those same decisions as you grow and continue to evolve. So your decisions may change. So we've learned that having these conversations leads to better outcomes. We've learned that it leads to improved quality of life, higher patient satisfaction, goal-driven care based on our preferences and values, fewer hospitalizations, better patient and family coping, and an ease of that burden of decision-making if family members have to make choices for you because we're not able to. So let's talk about some common barriers for having these discussions. So for healthcare providers, we've learned that one, Time is one of the big barriers. And so, they just don't have the time in their busy schedules to be having these conversations. We've also learned that they said that they lack the skill to have these conversations. So a physician wrote in and said, if we were shown how to have the conversation, maybe observed a little bit, provided some feedback, they would start to have better conversations. So physicians that were trained previously, several years ago, they might have experienced maybe an 8-hour day for education on end of life and hospice care. So now we have our physicians going through a 2-week residency, learning how to have these conversations, the art of communication, and palliative care, hospice care, and how to have these conversations with patients and loved ones. And then the third thing that they mentioned was clarity. They said that they lacked the clarity on whose job it was to have these conversations. So they polled primary care doctors, oncologists, cardiologists, pulmonologists, and they said, whose job is it to have these conversations? And all the docs kind of said, it's not my job, it's, the other doctors. When really, hopefully what we see in maybe 5 or 10 years is that these conversations are just as normal as vital signs or maybe getting a height and weight. So just asking about them, and it's not as unknown or fearful anymore. So we've asked people, why don't you think we're having these conversations with our loved ones? We got comments such as feeling it's too soon or fear of the subject. When I actually talked to my family, I just really hoped and prayed that nobody died within 3 days because they were going to definitely blame me for bringing it up. And so that's not true. Just because we talk about it doesn't mean it's going to make things happen. We also do this talk for lots of university and college age students. And, those kids aren't thinking anything about end of life for sure. But, we drive up and down Mopac or 35. And so anybody could have an accident or have something sudden that might change that. So there may be poor communication between patients and families. Maybe you only see your family twice a year. And if you talk about this, they might not get you presents anymore. So there may be poor communication. Health literacy is another thing that we see. So it's actually being able to be maybe diagnosed with a new condition, told about that condition, and then making good choices based on that information. So, depending on where we are on that health literacy scale can also affect our advanced care planning discussions. And then cultural, racial, and historical influences all play a role. So, one of the most common ones that I hear about is, maybe Uncle George had a heart attack and went to the hospital and had everything done, CPR done, was placed on a ventilator, had all sorts of different tubes and things like that, feeding and sustaining his life, because they didn't talk about what kind of care he would want. And then after Uncle George passes, maybe a few days after being in ICU, despite all those interventions, that gives families really a point of perspective to have this conversation and to say, what happened to Uncle George is definitely not something that I want to experience or happen. So that's a good way to maybe have an icebreaker or have a chance to have this discussion. So I did mention, it doesn't matter where we are on the health spectrum. We should all be having this conversation because it is something that we're going to face whether we like it or not. So if we're relatively healthy, it's really just insurance for that unexpected event in case of something sudden happens. If we have a chronic illness or condition, it's really getting information about that condition and what challenges we may face in the future. And then if you're in the late stage of a disease process, much like the patients that we have the honor of serving in hospice, it's really hoping for the best and preparing what to expect when the disease worsens. So let's talk about some next steps in regards to, okay, so now what do we do? One, think about who you would want to make medical decisions for yourself if you were unable to communicate. So that's the main thing. I'm going to talk about some things to think about when we pick that person, but that person would be who you would assign as your medical power of attorney. And it may not be your spouse or your loved one that's, the closest to you. That person may be too tenderhearted or not able to make good decisions in changing circumstances. And so maybe somebody else that's a little bit more removed so they can make good decisions for you. So after you've decided who to make your medical power of attorney, actually talking to that person and having the conversation about what's important to you given your current health status. So just like in the video, the grandson that spoke up, I am relatively healthy. So if something sudden was to happen to me, my family and my husband knows, if I can't communicate with them after a week, that they should probably stop doing interventions. So I want to be able to communicate with my family, and that's the most important thing for me, given my health status right now. Now, if I was diagnosed with a serious illness or at the end of my life, I may change that decision or have a different conversation on what that may look like. So, it varies across the gamut of your health spectrum, but it's important to have these conversations. I'm going to talk about a couple resources that you can utilize. There are lots of resources on the internet, but these are just two specific to kind of get you started and someplace to start thinking about what you need to think about. Also, in that printable information or even on their website, we have this little starter kit booklet. So just like Ellen Goodman said in the video, you have something physical to look at if you're more of a paper pen person versus a computer, which I am, or digital. So they say it's as easy as 4 steps. Get ready, get set, go, and keep going. And this website is actually, I think, in 17 or 18 different languages. So they have thought about different language barriers. So that's nice. Anybody across, the globe could access it. So if you have family in different parts of the world, they could utilize this and have the same information and resources. But it guides you through some different things to think about. One thing that I didn't think about that I see professionally in my life is, but I didn't ask my mom about, was as a patient, I'd like to know. So they talk about some little scales and questions. And does a person want to know everything about their condition, or do they not want to really know anything and have their family or loved ones take care of their situation? So, I didn't think about that. I see it all the time, but it is important to know what your person wants, so that way you can help to honor that. That's the little booklet that's available. The other website that we really like is called prepareforyourcare.org. What's nice about this website, it is in English and Spanish, and it goes through little video vignettes on how to have the conversation and what questions to think about. So what's nice about is you can actually observe people having this conversation, so it's not as unknown. And so, you can kind of get a little bit more comfortable with how you might want to ask the questions, and then also what questions to ask. So that's another great website. So at this time, I think Natalie can do a little poll. So I'd like to know how many of you have at least your medical power of attorney done? Oh, hosts and panels. Okay. So if you can answer that question, yes or no. And if you don't know what it is, then most likely you don't have it completed, and we're going to talk about it. And I think, Natalie, it calculates, right? It puts it up. Let's see. Survey said, okay, so, oh, great. 18 people have theirs completed. So good. So, and 6 don't. Awesome. Well, good. This may be a review for some, but it is also good to, let's see, oops, sorry. To review your documents from time to time. So the directives that we're going to talk about are the medical power of attorney, the directive to physician and families or surrogates known as the living will, and then the out of hospital do not resuscitate order for adults. So what I want you to know that's important is that this information is viewed differently state to state. So what does that mean? That means that each state has certain documents that are legal in their state. So one of the most common questions that we get is, well, what if we're traveling? Or we spend half time in Texas and half time in Montana? Well, one, your directives will be viewed and honored, with the medical team and your family, no matter where you are. So it's a good idea to carry them with you if you're traveling. If you have a home or something in another state, you could also consider looking up their directives and also just getting them completed in that state. But just know that if you have them, if you're in Colorado, that the healthcare provider team there at the hospital is going to review your documents and work with your family on honoring your wishes. So it'll be attached to the Google Drive documents that Natalie's sending out. We also have copies on our website at hospiceaustin.org, and you can click under advanced care planning. I think also Nancy will mention that they're on her website also. So you can also retrieve them from the Texas Department of Health website, which are the forms that we have on our website in Spanish and English. The other little piece of information is this organizing affairs booklet that we have, and it's a printable. So most agencies actually charge people for this organizing affairs booklet. What that is actually something that you would want to complete, and it has things like emails and your passwords, bank accounts, your bills, any insurances, assets, properties, contacts, things like that your family may need to know if you were to die suddenly. And so, back in the olden days, we would just kind of wait for mail to show up, and in a month we would know your parents or your family's contacts and who to reach out to. Not so much anymore now that everything's electronic or digital. So in the back of this little booklet too, it kind of has some things that might make a celebration of life or a memorial or funeral more personal. So there's a place for like your favorite colors, songs or poems or words that you might want said. So it's a really great little tool. It is not easy to complete, but once you have it completed, put it someplace safe where your family would know. It's not something you just want to leave out, obviously, with all those personal and private security codes and things like that. So let's talk about the medical power of attorney. The medical power of attorney is also called healthcare proxy or healthcare agent in some states. And this is the person that would help to make decisions for you if you were unable to make those choices. So most likely you're going to be at the hospital and the physician or the healthcare team there is going to say, Uncle George can't make medical decisions. Who is his medical power of attorney or next of kin? If you do not have this form in place, in the state of Texas, it goes to spouse, grown children, parents, siblings, and then next of kin to make medical decisions. So they would, the hospital or healthcare team there would reach out to your family to figure out who would be the one to make medical decisions for you. That person can talk to the doctors and the healthcare team about what's going on for you and help to make decisions and treatments and interventions and things like that. So when is the right time to choose this person? Anybody over the age of 18 should have a medical power of attorney completed. So when your children or grandkids turn 18, it's a good time to bring this up. And hopefully, as we start to do this, once again, it just becomes a more natural thing. So hopefully these next generations that are coming up, having a medical power of attorney, talking about death and dying is more of a natural process than we may have right now. How often should we review this choice? Frequently, and then more frequently as we age, obviously. So definitely, when we get married, definitely when we get divorced. One of my friends came to a presentation and realized that her ex-husband still had her medical power of attorney, and that was not who she wanted. So we quickly redid the medical power of attorney for her. Maybe when you get Medicare or new diagnoses or serious illness, and maybe as we age, maybe check it every 5 years or so. I took care of a little 93-year-old lady, and she pulled out her medical power of attorney and was so proud. But we realized that all 3 people on her medical power of attorney had already deceased. So she didn't have a relevant medical power of attorney at the time. Some important questions to ask. Can they make decisions in line with my wishes? Are they comfortable speaking up on my behalf? Can they make good decisions in changing circumstances? And can they make hard decisions? So in the state of Texas, the medical power of attorney can override any other medical decisions that you may have written out. Now, not all states are like that. So like in the state of California or New York, they have all of their directives tied together in one document and signed by a doctor, and it's an actual order. And so if you are a do not resuscitate in California or New York, your medical power of attorney cannot override that decision. In the state of Texas, your medical power of attorney can override any decisions that you may have written out. So you want to make sure that that's the right person to uphold your wishes. And that's why it may not be the best person as your spouse or your next of kin, because maybe they're just too tenderhearted or too close to make those decisions. Some common questions that we get: when does your medical power of attorney responsibility begin? When you are not able to make medical decisions for yourself. So just because you have one completed, as long as you can make those choices, whether they're good or bad choices, that is your right. Your medical power of attorney can't step and say, oh, I don't like mom's decision. I'm her medical power of attorney. I'm going to override that. I think we should do this. That does not work. Medical power of attorney only goes into effect when that person cannot make medical decisions for themselves. You can choose more than one person to be your medical power of attorney. On the document that we provide, there is a primary spot for a medical power of attorney and 2 alternate agents. I had a family that had 5 grown children, and they wanted all 5 to be primary. So they were able to locate a document on the website, on the web, and print that out and put all 5 as primary. It's not the best of choice because it can kind of get confusing when there's so many chiefs, but that was what they desired. So you can make more than one person primary. You don't have to pick your spouse or family members, but just be sure you tell them. If your neighbor runs up and says, I have medical power of attorney, and your family doesn't understand why, that can be definitely difficult. Rules legally, they need to be over the age of 18 and a competent adult. You can absolutely change your medical power of attorney. The one with the closest date to the present date is the effective form. So one time I was at Del Seaton, and a family had 9 medical power of attorneys. So I don't know if they just, every time they got in a fight, they redid their medical power of attorney. I'm not sure, but we just had to figure out which one was the closest date to the present date for the valid form. And you don't need a lawyer to help with this document. This document you can either actually have notarized on the page 3, or there's this keyword, or you can have 2 witnesses sign it. The witnesses, they ask that it's best if both of them are not of blood or marriage related, not going to gain anything from your estate, and not involved in direct patient care for you. It's best if neither one of them are those things. So just 2 friends or random witnesses would be better. If you are in a bind, number 2 person could be one of those things. So if you have one neighbor that could sign as witness 1, and they're not going to gain anything from your estate, and then the only other person you have is a family member, that's okay. They could be witness 2. There's that form. Let me see time-wise. This next form that I want to go over is the living will, or the advance directive to physician and families or surrogates. This is a legal document that only goes into effect when 1, you can't speak for yourself, and 2, you've either been diagnosed with an irreversible condition or a terminal condition, and then that's when this form would go into effect. So this form specifically talks about what types of treatments you would like or would not like. The form that we provide is once again from the Texas Department of Health. And this form is a very generic one. It says if you have a terminal condition, then you would either like to be kept comfortable and allowed to die naturally, or all available life-sustaining treatments. And you would just initial or check which box you prefer given that condition. And then below that is an irreversible condition. So this form only goes into effect once again when you can't speak for yourself and you have a terminal or an irreversible condition. Otherwise, it's kind of just hanging out like toilet paper, just there until those criteria are met and you need this form. So I have mine completed. I am not meeting any of those criteria at the minute. So once again, it's just there waiting for those conditions. My coworker, who was about 30 years old, had some significant brain surgery, and she made a very specific directive to her physicians and family. It laid out, it was like 7 or 9 pages, I can't recall, but it would say like in 21 days, if I'm not doing this, please stop doing this. So there are examples on the web. If you have a situation that you know you're facing, that you might want to be a little bit more specific. Not everybody can think of all those different scenarios. So really talking with your family and your medical power of attorney about what's important to you may be the best option versus, writing something out so specific, but you can find examples if you are faced with something like that and want to be more specific. On this form, there is a spot where you would place your name. You would initial which box you would prefer given those conditions. And then on this form, it actually has a spot for you to sign and then 2 witnesses. And once again, they ask that one of the witnesses not be any of those things related by blood or marriage, going to gain anything from your estate, or in direct care. But one of the witnesses can be those things. Witness 2 could be one of those criteria if given, a bind. Otherwise, they ask that 2 witnesses randomly would be better. This does not even have a place for a notary on this form. Then the last form that I want to review is the out of hospital do not resuscitate order for adults. And this form is the form that you specifically want to complete if you know for a fact that you do not want to be resuscitated. The things that are included are resuscitations, that's CPR with chest compressions, airway management, defibrillation with paddles, shocking paddles, artificial ventilation, and then pacing with those paddles. So if you know for a fact that you do not want to be resuscitated, that's when you would definitely want to complete this form. So it's usually somebody that may be diagnosed with a terminal illness or maybe of more advanced age that they may want to implement an out of hospital do not resuscitate order. This one, when you go to the lawyers and have your directives drawn up, they do not include this do not resuscitate order because this form requires a physician's signature on it. So I would say about 50% of my patients that I go see for admissions onto hospice services, they may say that they either talk to their lawyer about it and it's in their binder or their packet that the lawyer drew up, which it is not, or it's not completed properly. And it has to be completed properly for EMS or first responders to be protected by this order to not do resuscitation on you. So this form, let me see if I can blow it up. This form, you would put your name across the top, your date of birth, indicate male or female. You or your representative would sign A, B, or C. They prefer it's the person if possible, but a representative for you could be doing this if you're not able to speak for yourself. Then there's 2 witnesses, witness 1 and 2. Once again, they ask that it's best if that person doesn't, not related by blood or marriage, not going to get anything from your state, or in direct care of you. On the back page, it has the definitions for a lot of these terms and the instructions. They do ask that you photocopy both sides of the form. We've done this talk for several EMS and police and fire. They most likely will honor a form that's just the front page without the back side, but they would prefer that the back side be there. So you can have 2 witnesses sign it or a notary. Now, all of these dates for yourself and the witnesses or the notary need to be the same. You can't witness on another date. That doesn't work. The physician would sign this box right here. Now, his or her signature and date could be before or after your date. That doesn't matter. And then everybody who signs the top portion of this form has to sign this little teeny bottom portion in order for this to be filled out completely. So that's where we see a lot of the errors. Maybe somebody missed this bottom portion down here for whatever reason, and so it's not filled out completely. Once you have this completed, you can go to the Texas Department of Health website. There are about 4 agencies listed on their website that you can scan a completed document to or email it to them and purchase a medical medallion or bracelet that indicates to first responders that you have a completed form somewhere, and that protects them from doing CPR out in the streets or out in public. It is a very specific medical medallion. You can't just go to Amazon and buy like one of those little rubber band bracelets that say "do not resuscitate." That does not honor the things that they need to see in order to not resuscitate you. So let's see. A couple things that we've learned doing this presentation for thousands now is that when you go to the DPS to have your driver's license renewed in person, so far, I haven't heard of anybody being able to do it when you just do that one online, but in person, there is a place to indicate emergency contacts. There's a place for 2 people. What's nice about that is when the police scan your driver's license or pull up your license plate, they'll know immediately who to call and say, your loved one was in a car wreck. They're going to this hospital. Please meet them there. Otherwise, they have to figure out, 1, who you are, who your next of kin is, the next of kin's phone number, and then reach out to them. So you can indicate 2 emergency contacts on your driver's license. And you can also check a box that says directive to physician has been filed at telephone number. So you can either put in your medical power of attorney's number there, or maybe your physician's office phone number there. That brings up a good question. What do you do with the directives once you have them completed? 1, make sure your medical power of attorney has copies. 2, maybe keep a set of copies, in your car or with you, or on the ready. It's not something that you want to put in the safe deposit box where nobody really has access to it. There's not anything, like any personal information on it that could be shared in case if you lost it or whatever. So, have these available. We did talk about that organizing affairs booklet that's on our website. Please download, share that. If you go to our website and download it, it's a PDF and you can actually type in the fields and then print it out. So that's kind of nice. Or you could save it and email it to your family. But just once again, make sure that they keep it very safe. So the next action steps for this process is review those websites we talked about. Prepareforyourcare.org, in the conversationproject.org. Learn how to start to have this conversation. Figure out who you would want to speak for yourself if you could not make medical decisions. Talk to that person and make sure, 1, they're willing to accept the responsibility and that they know what's important to you. Print out your advanced directives, the organizing affairs workbook, and complete those, and then give those copies to your family, your medical power of attorney, and physicians. And we think that's pretty easy. So we do this talk a little bit longer, once a month, the first Thursday of the month at noon, the second Wednesday of the month at 6:30. So we would love to share this information with anybody who needs it. So definitely let us know. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Nancy. Nancy, are you there?
Okay, picking right up. Just a moment, please. Let's see if I can, okay. Oh. Are we seeing this on the screen? My first slide?
Yes, you just need to hit
Yeah,
slideshow.
Yes, just a moment, please. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. All right, so we've certainly gotten a lot of useful information from Ginny, and the idea is it feels good to take charge of our lives, including the last chapter of our lives. And I want to talk to you about how you can still be in charge even after you've passed away. And specifically, I'm going to talk about what are called disposition directives. Whether we like it or not, the universal mortality rate, as Chuck Meyer used to say, who was a leader in Austin in the end of life movement, was that sooner or later we are all going to pass away, and everyone we know will pass away. So advanced directives are good for everybody. So I do want to talk for just a moment about what do people feel is a good death? That's a Chuck Meyer term for sure. In various workshops and classes that I've conducted, these are some answers that people have come up with. We used to list them all on a flip chart. Okay, so no suffering. I wish I could see all of you who are here with us so I could see whether you're raising your hands because you go like, oh yeah, that works for me, but I'll just put them out there. Here are some other ones. People would prefer to die at home, not hooked up to machines. People have said they'd like it to be quick and painless. They'd like to die in their sleep. They'd like to pass out of here with no regrets and feeling valued by their loved ones. No unresolved issues or unfinished business. Surrounded by loved ones, which has been especially difficult in this time of COVID. And just basically at peace and also able to communicate. These are things that people have said they would like to have as the ideal circumstances at the time of their death. And then this is another wish that we hear quite often, and I'm going to be addressing this one. Okay? People tend to have opinions about what they would like to have done with their bodies. So here you go. There's a way, even after you've passed away, you can still have the last say. So basically, once someone has died, we've got three options of what we can do. The body can be donated to a university willed body program or a body procurement organization. Science Care is one example of such an organization. The body can be buried in a casket, or if you're into green burial, natural burial, where nothing that goes in the ground can be not biodegradable, you could be buried in a shroud or grandma's favorite old quilt. or you can be cremated. And then once your ashes are in an urn, the urn could be kept anywhere the family wants to keep it, or it could be put into a columbarium at a cemetery, or churches now, more churches than ever, are starting to build columbarium on their property. Or you can actually put an urn in a grave site. This is a question that comes up from time to time. A family, for example, could purchase one burial plot, but end up over a period of time interring a number of urns in it. They just have to keep paying the cemetery the opening and closing costs every time they open the plot to put in another urn. Okay, so as Jenny said, we have those two basic healthcare directives. The living will, which Texas calls the directive to physicians, specifies what do you want done if your condition is such that you're no longer able to speak for yourself. And the medical power of attorney form, where you designate someone to be your agent and to speak for you. Well, with the disposition directives, we've got the same setup. We've got the what document called the body disposition authorization, and we have the who do I want to make sure that these wishes are carried out, and that is the appointment for disposition of remains, where you name an agent. And these forms are on our website, but they will also be in the library. And after our gathering, Natalie will send out to everyone an email telling you how you can get these various handouts that Jenny and I are talking about today. Okay, so I just want to point out a few things. The body disposition authorization form is just a 2-page document, and you can actually print it double-sided copy. I just wanted to give you a few little heads up that when you specify in the document what you want done with your body, be sure to initial the box next to the choice rather than just putting a check mark. Now, unlike the healthcare directives, these disposition directives must be notarized. We don't have the 2-witness option with these. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So here is the second document, the appointment for disposition of remains, the WHO document, and this one's 3 pages. And it's pretty easy to fill out. And right at the top there, as you see with the red arrow, that's where you would name your agent, your primary agent. Now, just as Jenny told you with the medical power of attorney form, this form gives you an option to name some backup people. These are successors, just in case that first person you name cannot serve. There's all kinds of reasons why not. They could have actually passed away, but you hadn't yet thought to update your directive. So this person definitely will not be able to represent you in the real world here. Or maybe they were in a car wreck with you, and your agent and you were killed in that car wreck. So there's just all kinds of reasons why it's a good idea to, on this document, name some successors, some backup people. Now, it does ask for very specific information, address and phone number and so forth. Please don't think you have to do a new directive every time someone gets a different phone number or address. You simply attach a page to the directive indicating the updated contact information. And it's really a good idea with any of your directives to keep a list of which directive did you give to whom on what date. It's like a little log. And that way, when you make changes to your directives, you can go back and look at the list and say, oh, okay, let's see, 3 years ago, I gave this person my original directive, but now I've changed my mind. I need to let them know. Isn't it great that I have this list? So you don't miss sending updates to someone. Then, just like with the body disposition authorization, you need to get your signature notarized. You know, whether it's a notary looking at your driver's license or your next door neighbors, the whole function of witnesses and notaries is that they are saying you are who you say you are. That's what the function is. Somebody to stand up and say, yes, this is Nancy, or this is Janie or John. All right. So these disposition directives and the medical directives that Jenny talked to you about, they're all on our website. And if you just go to the home page, you'll see across the top, at least if you're looking on a monitor rather than a cell phone. Cell phone, you might have a little kind of drop down menu off to the side, but basically you're looking for the directives tab. And when you click that, you're going to see a whole bunch of directives. And for the purpose of the disposition directives, you want to scroll down past the medical ones that Jenny talked about and go to the area where you will find the body disposition and the form for the agent. Okay, and while you're out there, take a look. We've got a lot of other information under various tabs. And we're especially proud to tell you that we recently completed our annual funeral home price survey. Our organization serves 5 counties. Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson. And every January, we get price lists from all the funeral homes located in these 5 counties, more than 50. And we create a chart. And the chart has popular disposition options such as direct cremation. Direct cremation, it's like, just go get my body, take it back to the funeral home, schedule my cremation, do the cremation, then notify the family that my ashes are ready to pick up. And I'm telling you, it is a revelation. Like in our chart, if you run your finger down the direct cremation columns, and the chart does take up several pages because we're covering 5 counties, you will see a funeral home where you can get this direct cremation for $595. But keep running your finger down the column and you'll see there are funeral homes in our area that charge over $4,000 to do exactly the same thing. So it can really, having this information and the ability to compare prices at funeral homes is really potentially a tremendous money saver. Okay, my contact information is in the chat, but it's also here on the bottom of this slide. And basically, we're all volunteers with the Funeral Consumers Alliance, and we're doing what we do from home. So I have my home number there and my email. And now Jenny and I are ready to answer questions that will be fed to us from the chat function. Okay, how's that sound? Okay.
All right, perfect. Nancy, if you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen, and then
I think I have.
Jenny's back up. Yes, you have.
Okay.
So right now we have one question, which is regarding the driver's license and how to get contacts and directives to physician indicated. Do they need to go to the Texas Motor Vehicles and have them update current driver's license to have this included?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they would charge you for adding that or not. I can probably definitely look and see, but usually when we go, we have to renew what, every 2 years, I think. So when we go in person, then that's when you can indicate those things. I think is it $10 to maybe renew your driver's license? I'm not even sure. But yes, you would have to go in person. And I know you could make an appointment. So Mary, if you wanted to make an appointment online, or reach out to them and ask them, they might be able to tell you.
I want to mention that on our directives page, there is an emergency contact wallet card that you can print on 8.5 by 11 paper. Double-sided is ideal if you can do that, or if you can't, you just print one side, turn the page around and stick it back in the printer and print the second side. And then you'll see some dotted trim marks down the side of the page. So you trim that away, and then on this, it asks, it says right there who your primary care physician is, who your medical power of attorney agent is, and then there's a section where you can add additional information. So this contact card, which when you fold it, it's the size of a credit card, you can just stick that in your wallet with your driver's license, and it provides even more useful information than the back of the driver's license. So until you get down to the DMV and give them your $10, you've got a good backup there.
Also, you can on, I think Apples are a little bit more simple, but on our smartphones, you can add emergency contacts to the locked screen. So if you have a phone that's locked, there is a way to add your emergency contacts to your lock screen. There's also apps that you can purchase for Android and Apple. I think the Apple ones are still better than the Android, that will actually store your directives, and it will put it on the lock screen as an icon. So the EMS could actually, if they found your phone, could look to see who your emergency contacts are, and if you have directives there too. So that's a way that they could at least view them on your smartphone. Nancy, Mary's asking, the emergency contact card wallet is on their website, Mary. So on the Funeral Consumer Alliance, Central Texas Funeral Consumer Alliance website, there is the foldable wallet printable.
Nancy, if you don't mind, could you put your information in the chat one more time, please?
Sure, be glad to do that.
Another question is, are military bases in the area available for burials to veterans and their families?
Yes. All the family needs is to produce a DD 214. Gosh, I think that's the right number. The honorably discharged document to demonstrate to the Veterans Administration that the decedent was an honorably discharged veteran. And actually, on our website, which I'm going to put in the chat here, under the costs tab, that's where we have the 2021 funeral home price survey, but we also have our 2020 cemetery survey. It's just a little 2-pager because it's a sampling of cemeteries in our 5-county area. And at the bottom of page 2, it has all this good information about the veteran cemeteries, whether you want to be buried in a Texas veteran cemetery, the nearest of which is Killeen, or perhaps down in San Antonio at the National Cemetery. It's got the phone numbers and everything. So really all the family needs to come up with is the DD 214. And even if a person does not want to be buried in a veteran cemetery, maybe because it's kind of far away for the family to visit as regularly as they would like to. There are still veteran benefits. They will supply a headstone if you want to be buried in maybe the City of Austin Cemetery. The Veterans Administration will still pay for the military headstone, and they will provide an honor guard to come to the memorial service or the funeral service and do the presentation of the flag to the family. I'm getting chill bumps. I've been at services where they come. Oh, I am getting chill bumps. It's just so beautiful where they play the taps and they fold the flag in a certain kind of way, and they present it to the family. So that contact information for the Veterans Administration is on page 2 at the bottom of the cemetery survey. And I am now going to type our, okay, somebody did it for me. You see that? fcactx.org. Or just, Google Funeral Consumers Alliance Austin, and I think our website should come up. We've got a lot of good SEO items.
Okay, so a couple other questions. If I live alone with no siblings, kids, or immediate family, any ideas for who to name medical power of attorney? Recommend particular contingency care agencies that might serve that role, and if that's recommended. And then there's a secondary question about the cemetery asking if they will still charge for the placement of the complimentary headstone.
Well, I'll address the first question. So if you don't have anybody that would be willing to represent you, I mean, you could always ask maybe, a dear friend to maybe be willing to accept that responsibility. Most people that I know would be honored if somebody asked. So it's really not a burden to be asking. I think somebody, so a dear friend would be probably willing, somebody maybe part of a church, if you're part of a church or support group, or, a friend could be definitely one. There are several agencies that are what they call case management, medical case management. I would say nurses case management, but sometimes it's a social worker. But one agency, I think there's about 4 in the area. The one that I know immediately is called Care For. So it's care and then FOR. They used to be called Nurses Case Management, but now they're called Care For. But when you Google that populates the 4 agencies in the area that you could choose from. They would take responsibility for making medical decisions if you needed them to do that. They will also kind of review your information and create what they call like a face sheet, which is really nice. And actually, we could all create our own face sheet. It's just like usually a 1-page form that has your name, your insurance information on it, your social, your date of birth, your allergies, your physicians that you are associated with and their phone numbers, your medical history, sometimes with a date or timeline for your medical history. Medications and dosages and frequencies are all on this piece of paper. So that's something you could consider. It's not something you want to just lay around, once again, nilly-willy with your phone number and social on there. But Care For will create this document and go over some things with you. So you could hire somebody to be your medical power of attorney if needed. So I would recommend looking at those case management agencies that are local in town.
Yeah, it's sort of like hiring a trust department at a bank to overlook your financial affairs. I know with these organizations that Jenny was talking about, you become their client, and it's really not like a one-stop thing. Let you make out your directives and you walk in there and say, okay, here they are. It's like, not only do you need to have that conversation with them that you would have had with your family if your family were still available, but as far as I know, they also want to see you at least once a year and keep track of your medical conditions and so forth. I think that's part of being responsible medical fiduciaries. Oh, okay. Yes, there may be a setting fee at the cemetery for placing the military headstone at the grave. I wish I could tell you, I knew for sure one way or the other, whether that is a cost that the family would absorb or whether the Veterans Administration will pay for that. I do know that if someone is interred in a veteran cemetery, they pay for everything the minute the urn or the casket crosses through the entrance of the veteran cemetery, but they do not allow a graveside services. They have sort of a special place. It's kind of like a chapel or whatever, where people gather, but for the actual interment of the casket, the family is not invited to be there. And they have columbarium niches as well as grave plots.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask?
I was just curious, both of you are so experienced. This is Karen. Just, going back to the Diane Sawyer video that Ginny showed, have you all in your experience kind of seen people have those conversations, and how did they go? Or are most people sort of taken off guard when this kind of comes up? Or I would just, if you had any stories you wanted to share.
I'll bet Jenny's got tons of stories about how it goes in the ICU waiting room when families have not completed these documents. Jenny, you want to tell them some war stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens all the time, more frequently than not, just like Dr. Gwande was saying. And it can be a cultural thing too. A lot of families don't talk about this culturally. And I'm sure Nancy has examples too. But
at the funeral home.
yeah, absolutely. And there was such a significant difference on the family's demeanor when these conversations have been going on. So, a family that has talked about death and dying versus a family that has totally shied away from it. And, anytime the idea of even end of life comes up, they always say, no, I don't want to talk about that. So, yeah, absolutely.
And the guilt, when they don't have the conversations never taken place and they finally arrive at a decision, maybe as difficult as it can be, there can be terrible guilt afterwards, second guessing. Did we really make the correct decision that mom or dad or whoever would have wanted? And the same thing at the funeral home. People can just get into terrible disagreements about, for example, cremation versus burial and things like that. The appointment form to name a disposition agent is a particularly important form for couples that are not in a traditional marriage, but the significant other had always thought, I'll be the person that will make these decisions at the funeral home and take care of this. And guess what? If they're not legally married, or the parent or whatever, they are cut out of the deal. So for same-sex couples, for example, that appointment for appointing an agent is especially useful. Otherwise, the family will just get in there and it just won't go the way the decedent wanted it to.
Oh, good point, Nancy. Yes, thank you so much.
I just want to go ahead and remind everyone, so both of the presentations, the PowerPoints, all of the documents that they've talked about, we've created a Google Drive folder, and we're going to send the link to everyone who attended today so you can access all of this. And then also, Jenny offered to mail or deliver copies of the forms and brochures as well. So you can always contact myself or Cindy if for some reason you lose Ginny's information. Please let us know if you would like those in paper form. And then we also have recorded this. And so you'll get a link for the presentation in the email tomorrow as well. But again, as always, please let us know if there's anything you need. We're so glad you joined us. Nancy and Jenny, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and for sharing everything. And thank you to everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in April.
I do have one more thing I want to say. There is a place on the directive to physicians document. It's my favorite place on the whole document. It's on page 2, and it's called additional requests. Because as Ginny said, the way the form in Texas has been designed, it's like, okay, well, you have a terminal condition. Do you or do you not want extraordinary life-saving procedures? Boom. Scenario 2, you have an irreversible condition, and it kind of defines what that is. And then there's more definitions on the last page of the directive. After you've completed everything and you get to the 5th page, you go like, oh, that's what those terms mean. Anyway, so you have the irreversible condition, and you have those same 2 choices that you had with the terminal condition. Either you do or you do not want these extraordinary life-saving procedures. And then basically, it's over. The form, that's it. 2 scenarios and 2 choices for each of those scenarios. Well, on page 2, after you've made your decisions about those 2 scenarios, there's a place called additional requests. And that is, I regard that as the gateway to making your directive more comprehensive. It's not required, but I'll tell you what, the more supplemental information that you can attach to your directive about other kinds of situations, or there's several directive supplements out now having to do with dementia, advanced directive supplement for dementia, because dementia is just a horrible condition, and we're seeing more and more frequency of it. So all you need to do, whatever you feel is useful information to help your healthcare providers and your agent understand what your wishes are, attach that stuff to your directive and sign and date it, and then refer to those attachments in that supplemental area, additional requests. And by listing what's attached to the directive to physicians, you're linking the documents together. And then some people are saying, you know what, you can also double down on your directive by making a video. Get that grandkid out there with that cell phone and say, you know, I want to do a quick little video to kind of summarize the things that are most important to me in terms of medical care that I would or would not want. And actually, those videos carry a lot of weight, especially if the written document, say, is 10 years old, but the video was made 3 months ago. It really helps double down on the fact that, yeah, I still mean what I said in my written document.
Good point. Also, on the medical power of attorney, you know, I mentioned that your medical power of attorney can override any other written out descriptions, but on your medical power of attorney, underneath the primary name, you can indicate limitations on their power. So if you know for a fact that you do not want to be resuscitated, or you do not want IV fluids or artificial nutrition, those types of things, you could specifically write that in this box, and they cannot override any of those requests.
Yeah, you could even say that in
Mhm.
that area, that my agent must honor my directive to physicians or step away.
Yeah. The other thing, also, we have a little booklet. It's called, I don't have an example here. It's called Hard Choices for Loving People. I'm more than happy to drop one of those by also if you want some printed materials. So we could definitely get that in your hands to help kind of go over. It has things specific about like CPR, the pros and cons to CPR, so that you can make a good decision. Pros and cons to IV hydration and nutrition, hospice care, when's the right time. I don't remember what else is in there, but it is not a super easy read, but it is a very good read and some useful information. And once again, it provides the pros and cons to those things so that you can make a good decision based on your health status and those choices. So that's a book called Hard Choices for Loving People, and we can get you a copy of that too. I see another question. Are specifics for palliative care different for the standard forms? Are specifics for palliative care different for the standard forms? So we can talk a little bit about palliative care and hospice care. So hospice care is something that are services available when somebody, a physician thinks that that person is not going to be with us in 6 months. So a physician has to say that they think to their best knowledge that a person, it wouldn't be surprising if a person was to pass away in 6 months. So for palliative care is really, there is no definite, there's no timeline, meaning palliative care really focuses on quality of life and comfort measures and symptom management. So you can be getting treatments while you're also on palliative care. So say you have cancer and you're still doing cancer treatments, palliative care may get involved to help manage symptoms or anything that's coming up during your course of treatments. So palliative care can be accessed while you're still getting interventions done. Hospice care, usually you've decided to stop focusing on aggressive treatments and interventions and focus purely on comfort measures. I don't think that there is any difference. I'm not quite sure what I don't think that there's anything different in regards to the forms. Nancy, do you read anything? Or maybe Mary, you can be more specific. I'm not quite sure.
I don't know. Is palliative care among the definitions on page 5?
On page 5, not on any of these forms.
Okay.
Is that what you're
The thing is, when you're in hospice, palliative care is going to be made available as needed, but you do not have to be in hospice to get palliative care. Sometimes there's a confusion about that.
Absolutely.
So anyone that is in a condition of suffering, they don't have to have a terminal condition or be in hospice. And palliative care is a rising specialty. There are numerous palliative care physicians here in Austin now.
That's
so it's interesting, Ginny said the doctor kind of certifies that more likely than not that you'll pass away from your admitting condition within 6 months. But I always like to tell people it doesn't obligate you.
That's right.
And there are certification periods in hospice that you just keep getting recertified. And there are admitting conditions that can take several years to unfold to the final end. But what's really sad is so many families finally admit their loved one to hospice 48 hours before the person dies.
So Mary put, sorry, I guess I just Wondering if we need to address requests specify palliative care on any of the directives. No, you don't need to you don't need to specify palliative care on any of the directive, or if it's assumed you'll receive as needed. Correct. Need to specific yes and no preferences with the standard directives. So yeah, so I don't think you don't need to specify on these, because the directive is specific when you get a terminal condition or an irreversible condition is when your directed to physician would go into effect.
I think I don't have the form in front of me, Jenny, but in those choices where you say I don't want extraordinary measures, does it say something like I just want comfort or palliative care? Does it actually spell that out?
So so there is a box that, or a statement below that says this selection does not apply to hospice care. So
Right.
if somebody has a terminal condition and has requested to be kept alive using all available life-sustaining treatment,
They're
and
not
then
gonna
they
be in hospice.
and then they sign on to hospice, then this form no longer is effective. When
Right.
you're on hospice, if you've asked for all available life-sustaining treatment, then you are opting for comfort care, regardless of what your directive says.
Yeah.
Now, if you sign off of hospice, then your form would go back into effect.
Right.
So
But in that second choice, let's just let's go to the irreversible condition
mhm,
scenario. So the second choice where you decline all of the intubation and everything like that, when
mhm.
it spells out and describes that second choice, is palliative care mentioned right there in that choice?
No, it just says, I request that all treatments other though, I mean, it does, I mean, that's what palliative care is. I
Yeah.
request that all treatments other than those needed to keep me comfortable be discontinued or withheld, and my
So that's what
physician
palliative
allow me to
care
die
is.
as gently as possible.
Yeah, so that's exactly what palliative care is.
Yeah, correct. Did that answer your question, Mary?
I have a question kind of in line with what Mary's asking. So on your directives, are you able to attach like additional pages and get basically as specific as you want to?
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was like my coworker did. She wrote very specific instructions. You know, if in 2 weeks I'm not doing this, then please stop doing these interventions. So yes, absolutely. You can get very specific on what you do or do not want if you can think of all those scenarios. I don't think I could think of all those scenarios, but
Well,
there
we have on our website in the directives page, we have another document called the medical planning worksheet.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Nancy.
Yes, and the medical planning worksheet actually lists down the left-hand side a whole bunch of medical interventions. And then it has 5 different scenarios in increasing order of severity. And you can look at some of these medical treatments and say, I would want, if this scenario fitted me at a certain time, I would want this treatment, I wouldn't want that treatment, and so forth. That helps, but you know, be aware medical science is making such great progress. There's no way that that list of medical interventions could ever be complete, but it would give your agent and you a good starting place and a good feel for it as your condition gets more and more severe. Is there a place where your answer changes? Up until a certain point, you'd say, yeah, do this, try everything. And then when you get to a certain level of severity, maybe your quality of life is been very compromised, you go like, here's the stopping point. I'm now going to check for this particular medical intervention. No. Or again, like Natalie said in her question, it's good to attach things to say, well, I'll tell you what, if the circumstances, the doctor and my medical agent talk about my situation, and it seems that being put on a breathing machine might be helpful in this situation, then go for it. But I want my condition re-evaluated a week later or whatever. And if there's been no improvement, then disconnect me. You know, that's kind of a nuancy thing. So whatever, you can just have at it, say anything you want in your supplements. But again, on page 2, in that additional request section on the Texas form, link your supplemental materials to the directive by just saying, see supplemental materials for additional information about treatments I do or do not want. There you go.
Top part.
Yeah, it doesn't give you much room. Like, well, maybe a sentence or two and you're done. I go, the heck with that. You just write see supplements and be sure to date and sign them. I might even have my witnesses or my notary do the supplements to give them additional gravitas.
Yeah.
That's great. Mary had a follow-up question. She said, palliative care is given as needed and offered by all physicians, even if not specifically requested.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, that would be amazing if they did. But no, I mean, you can always specifically ask for palliative care or make a referral depending on your insurance, but you can ask for palliative care to become part of your team. So the palliative care is really a consultation. They don't make direct orders. They usually will come out and do a holistic plan. So what's neat about palliative care is that they're looking at a person as a whole being and including everything. So, you know, when we go to the cardiologist, they just write about your heart. They say, oh, Miss Smith is in great shape. But that is just per your heart. You might have lung conditions or digestive issues or other things that specialists would say, no, you know, Janie is not in good health because of, you know, her gut or whatever. So the cardiologist and all your specialists take each little section of you, but they don't put you together as a whole person. And, you know, sometimes your internist or a primary care will look at you as a whole, but palliative care also takes into effect things like your spiritual component, your independence component. You know, are you navigating around your house okay? Can you go get groceries? Can you cook a meal on the stove, or do you have to use the microwave? So they really look at, you know, do you have a dog that's too strong for you to walk that might pull you down? Are you, you know, does that make a fall risk? So they really look at everything and can evaluate even your home environment if you have the palliative team come to your home, which is a pretty common that the palliative team will come to your home to make an evaluation. But they look at everything and they piece together all of your organ systems all together. So that way they can really see, you know, what's going to help them feel the best and have the best quality of life and remain independent and be doing the things that you want to be doing. So that's what's so amazing about palliative care. And they're going to look at your symptoms and try to relieve those symptoms so that you're feeling the best. So they will consistently keep looking at like your nausea, say you're just nauseated and your primary care doctor just gives you like some reflux meds and you try that for a month and then that didn't work. And so then you go back and they give you some nausea meds and you have to try that for a month. Well, so your palliative care team will look at other things. Maybe it's something you're eating that doesn't agree with your belly or something dietary, you know, that maybe your primary care or your internist wasn't necessarily looking at. So you can always ask, depending on your insurance, you know, if your palliative care team can be referred to separately or if you need a physician's referral to that group.
Well done, Ginny.
Thanks. Perfect.
All right, I think that might be all of our questions. Again, thank you so much, Nancy and Ginny, for all of your time and your help. Karen, thank you as well for joining us. And we look forward to, oh, you know what? Here's another one. Does insurance cover palliative care?
Yeah, so there are several different palliative care teams. I think there are on the rise in the area. There is one specifically that Hospice Austin works with, and they're called Austin Palliative Care. They do have a time window because they want to make sure that they're addressing the patient population that needs them the most right now. Since they're up and running, they do have a qualifying time period of 2 years for their group. There is another group, Geriatric Palliative Care. It's Dr. Fry's group. She's amazing. Most palliative groups do not have that 2-year window because you can get palliative care anywhere across the board. But most insurances, you can call each group just like your doctor's groups to see which insurances they do take. Most of them take Medicare, Medicaid for sure. But you would just have to reach out to one of those groups, find out, you could also reach out to your insurance and see too. But you could call a palliative care group and they can run your insurance just like for dentists or a doctor's appointment. And
we have
one other thing, sorry, Nancy.
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
Austin Palliative Care Group, they do have a sliding scale. So if you don't have insurance and it doesn't cover it, Austin Palliative Care, they do want to be able to provide the care. And so St. David's Foundation has given them a grant to be able to go into the community and serve. So if you're within that 2-year window and you don't have insurance, they want to be able to serve you. So you may qualify for that service.
Nancy Lopez, I don't know if she's still with us, but at a certain point in the chat, she said if we had Medicare questions, that she would be able to help. So if Nancy's still on the call, because Jenny and I can't see the participants, Nancy, do you know if Medicare would routinely cover palliative care, or is it maybe it's on a case-by-case basis? I think, like Ginny said, getting a referral from a primary care physician or another physician, I think that adds weight, saying this is an important element in this patient's treatment regimen, as opposed to you just decide you want it and you walk, because let's see.
Yeah, might be a case by case,
Okay.
and it will depend if they are on traditional or Medicare Advantage plan.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Nancy.
But if you do reach out to any of the palliative care teams without a referral, they will do the behind the scenes work and reach out to your primary care doctor or to your specialist too to get that referral. So they can handle it too.
If these Medicare Advantage programs are giving us silver sneakers, it seems to me that the least they can do is give us palliative care.
Yeah, that's a great program. Well, thank you so much for having us. And please reach out to us if we can be of any service question-wise. I'm certainly honored if you do need anything or if you would like a printed package, we definitely would love to get that to you.
Yeah. Our materials on our website, the Funeral Home Price Survey and other items, there's no charge for them. They're available to everyone in the community. Although if you were to decide to become a member, you will get a hefty new member packet with 22 different items in it, including the advanced directives.
Thank you both. There was just one more comment in the chat. I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing anything before I sign off. Okay. Okay, great. Well, again, thank you everyone and have a great rest of your Monday. Bye everyone.
Thanks so much.